For half a century, Jack Nicholson was the face of rebellion.
No, I would say it was a gradual thing as it
The grin that could light up a room or burn it down. Hollywood called him untouchable, the wild genius who never missed. But when the spotlight faded, something darker lived behind that smile. The laughter stopped, and the grudges began to speak. Now, at 88, the legend who built his empire on chaos finally opens the door to his own. Behind the glitter and the gold are six names he swore he would never forgive. They were not strangers. They were heroes, friends, even the people who once saved him. Each one crossed a line so deep that even time could not erase it. This is not the story of fame. It is the story of betrayal, of broken loyalty, of a man who gave everything to the screen and lost pieces of himself behind it. Tonight, we uncover the truth Jack kept buried for decades, the truth that turned admiration into hatred and silence into confession. If you are ready to see the side of Nicholson the world was never meant to see, make sure you subscribe right now. And if you are still with me and ready to dive in, comment the number 1 below so we know you are brave enough to continue. Number 1, Marlon Brando, the idol who became Jack Nicholson's greatest heartbreak. In the spring of 1976, under the pale skies of Montana, two titans of Hollywood finally stood face to face. Jack Nicholson was 40 years old, sharp as a blade, at the height of his craft. Marlon Brando was 62, a living legend, the man who had rewritten the language of acting. For decades, Jack had studied his every gesture, his every silence. To him, Brando was not just a hero. He was proof that art could be raw, fearless, and alive. But when Jack stepped onto the set of the Missouri Breaks, he found something unexpected. His idol had changed. Brando no longer carried the fire that once made the screen tremble. He arrived late, heavier, slower, surrounded by a fog of indifference. The crew whispered that the old magic was gone, and they were right. Brando refused to study the script. Instead, he began using cue cards. At first, it seemed harmless, even funny. Then the cards multiplied. They appeared everywhere, on walls, on chairs, on lamps, even taped to the foreheads of crew members. By the end of production, more than 400 cards were scattered across the set. The man once hailed as the most instinctive actor alive was now reading his lines like a man lost in a maze of his own words. The transformation stunned Nicholson. Each day felt like walking into a circus run by a fallen god. Brando shifted accents without warning, sliding from Irish to Scottish to something no one could name. One morning, he walked onto the set wearing a bonnet and told the makeup team he wanted to explore the feminine side of his character. The crew laughed, but Jack did not. He felt the weight of every wasted hour. What should have been a duel of masters became a test of endurance. Nicholson fought to protect the film. He rehearsed late into the night, rewriting scenes, tightening his focus. He told a friend later that acting beside Brando felt like dancing with a ghost that refused to keep time. Each scene was a struggle between chaos and control. Brando treated the production like an experiment. Jack treated it like a battlefield. The tension grew so thick that one assistant director said you could feel it buzz in the air like an electric wire ready to snap. When the Missouri Breaks finally premiered, the disappointment was swift and merciless. The movie cost $13 million to make but barely recovered half of it at the box office. Critics called it confusing, indulgent, and empty. Jack stayed silent as the world moved on. But inside, he carried the ache of betrayal. He had looked up to Brando as a symbol of truth, only to watch that truth crumble in front of him. Friends noticed the change. The man who once spoke about Brando with awe now avoided the subject completely. When someone mentioned the film, Jack would smile politely and pour another drink. To him, the failure was not about money or fame. It was personal. He had watched a gush fall from the sky, and the sound of that fall stayed with him for years. Brando dismissed the criticism. He told the reporters he was done with Hollywood and no longer cared what anyone thought. But behind the curtain, his career faded. Within a decade, he retreated from the spotlight, a giant haunted by his own shadow. For Nicholson, that experience became a private lesson. He learned that talent without discipline rots like fruit left in the sun. He learned that genius is not a gift unless it is protected by work. And he learned that even the brightest star can burn out when it forgets to shine for someone other than itself. Years later, when a young actor asked Jack what it was like to work with Marlon Brando, he paused for a long time. Then he said that Brando was everything he hoped for and everything he feared he might become. That was the moment Jack stopped believing in idols. Because once you stand close enough to watch a legend destroy his own crown, you never see greatness the same way again. Number 2, Shelley Duvall, the co-star who pushed Jack Nicholson to the edge. In the winter of 1979, deep inside the frozen maze of Elstree Studios outside London, a film began that would test every nerve Jack Nicholson had left. The Shining was supposed to be his masterpiece, the ultimate collision between discipline and madness. Behind the camera stood Stanley Kubrick, a man famous for perfection. Beside him stood Shelley Duvall, the fragile and unpredictable actress cast as his on-screen wife. No one could have imagined that what happened on that set would scar everyone involved for decades. Jack entered the project focused and prepared. He studied the script like a soldier studying a map before battle. Kubrick demanded precision. Every line, every glance, every heartbeat had to fit inside his vision. At first, Nicholson found comfort in that structure. But soon, Tom, the boundaries began to crack. Kubrick believed in breaking his actors to rebuild them. He made Shelley repeat the same scene over and over until her voice cracked and her body shook. The crew later counted 127 takes for a single shot, a number that became legend. Day after day, she cried, trembled, and begged for rest. Her hair began to fall out from stress. Her hands shook so badly, she could barely hold a cup between takes. Jack tried to stay patient, but the chaos wore him down. He needed a partner to dance with, someone who could share the rhythm of fear and control. Instead, Shelley moved like a broken instrument, out of tune and out of time. One moment she was radiant, the next she seemed lost in a fog of exhaustion. The emotional rhythm he depended on vanished. It was like trying to waltz while the music kept changing key. The tension between them grew so thick it became another character in the room. Jack's anger started to seep into his performance. His voice grew rougher, his eyes sharper. What audiences later saw as pure madness was part acting and part survival. Each scream, each glare, each swing of that axe came from a man pushed past the edge of patience. Behind the scenes, Kubrick manipulated the friction. He whispered different things to each actor, feeding their mistrust. He isolated Shelley, kept her apart from the crew, refused her comfort. Jack followed orders, but hated what it was doing to her. He once told a friend that working on The Shining felt like living in a haunted house where the ghosts were alive and the living were already dead. When filming finally ended after 13 exhausting months, everyone was broken. Kubrick called it art. The studio called it genius. But for Jack and Shelley, it was something darker. She disappeared from the spotlight for years. Her spirit drained. Jack kept working. But something in him hardened. The easy laughter, the playful mischief that had defined his earlier roles, grew quieter. The Shining became one of the greatest horror films ever made. Critics praised Jack's performance as legendary, the perfect portrait of insanity. But few knew how much of that insanity was real. Shelley once said that making the movie was like living inside a storm that never stopped. For Jack, it was the storm that changed how he looked at acting forever. He later admitted that he underestimated the damage Kubrick's process caused. He said that Shelley carried the pain while he carried the guilt. Watching her collapse taught him that brilliance can come at a price too high to pay. Every masterpiece has a cost, and sometimes that cost is human. Years later, when fans asked about The Shining, Jack no longer spoke about the movie itself. He talked about the people. He said that what they created was built on exhaustion, fear, and sacrifice. It was a triumph carved from pain. For Nicholson, the lesson was cruel but clear. Art that destroys the artist is not art worth repeating. The Shining gave him immortality, But it also gave him a memory he could never escape. He learned that behind every perfect frame can hide a heartbreaking in silence. And though time softened his judgment, the memory of those days never left him. He still respected Shelley's courage. He still admired her strength. But he never forgot the piano, because when the lights went out and the camera stopped, what remained was not horror from a movie. It was the quiet truth that sometimes the monsters are not in the story. They are standing behind the camera, watching you fall apart. Number 3, Tom Cruise. The superstar Nicholson called empty in the summer of 1992 on a soundstage in Culver City. Two generations of Hollywood collided. Jack Nicholson was 55, a man who had already conquered the mountain. Tom Cruise was 30, the golden boy of a new era, flawless, fast, and fiercely disciplined. Together they stepped into the courtroom of A Few Good Men, a film that would define both of them in the eyes of the world. On screen, it looked like fire meeting steel. Nicholson as Colonel Jessup, proud, brutal, unbreakable. Cruise as Lieutenant Kaffee, young, bold, relentless. Their showdown gave birth to one of the most quoted lines in film history. The line shouted across the courtroom that made audiences freeze. It was electric. But behind that electricity, Jack felt something missing, a quiet emptiness he could not shake. Nicholson believed acting should be alive, dangerous, unpredictable. He wanted to stand across from someone who could surprise him, who could make him forget the script for a second. With Cruise, everything felt calculated. Every blink, every breath, every smile landed exactly where it was planned. He was flawless in the way a machine is flawless. The camera adored him. The audience adored him. But to Jack, that perfection felt like glass, beautiful, cold, and hollow. During filming, Nicholson tried to break through the surface. He would shift tone mid-line, change his pace, improvise words just to see if Cruise would follow. But the young star never wavered. His rhythm stayed locked in place. Jack once told a colleague that looking into Cruise's eyes during a take felt like watching gears turn behind polished glass. There was skill, precision, even beauty, but there was no danger. And without danger, to Jack, there was no truth. The courtroom scenes stretched for weeks. Kubrick might have demanded 70 takes, but director Rob Reiner needed only 10. Cruise delivered every word exactly the same each time, perfect in sound, perfect in form. Nicholson respected the discipline, but grew restless. He wanted the chaos of live theater, not the smoothness of a studio recording. To him, acting was jazz, not an orchestra. Cruise was playing from sheet music while Jack wanted to set the room on fire. When the famous confrontation was filmed, the room was silent between takes. Nicholson stood in uniform, sweat glistening under the lights, staring at the younger man who represented everything the new Hollywood had become. Rehearsal after rehearsal. He poured real fury into the scene. He wanted to break through Cruise's armor, to make him react instead of perform. The explosion that audiences saw was real, but not in the way they imagined. It was not character against character. It was Nicholson trying to reach the soul of his co-star and finding nothing but precision, staring back. After the film's release, A Few Good Men became a phenomenon. It earned more than $200 million worldwide and turned Cruise into a symbol of perfection. But Nicholson's feelings never changed. He admired the success, yet saw the performance as an empty victory. He once told friends that working with Cruise was like listening to a song that hit every note, but never moved the heart. Over time, their paths never crossed again. Jack continued to seek danger in his roles, craving unpredictability. Cruise continued his climb, building an empire of control and endurance, performing his own stunts, defying gravity, time, and fear to the world. Both men were icons. To each other, they were opposites orbiting different suns. Years later, when asked about Cruise, Nicholson did not criticize him. He simply said that Tom was too perfect for his taste. He respected the discipline, but missed the madness. He believed that real art required the risk of failure, the willingness to break something beautiful to find something true. For Nicholson, that film was proof that the soul of Hollywood had shifted. The new generation chased perfection, while the old one chased truth. He knew which side he belonged to. A few good men won awards, broke records, and sealed both their legacies. Yet for Jack, it carried a quiet sadness. He realized that the future of acting would belong to men like Cruise, masters of image and control. But deep down, he also knew that something wild and dangerous had been lost. And so he walked away from that set knowing he had just looked into the mirror of a new Hollywood. The reflection was bright, flawless, and empty. Number 4. Faye Dunaway, the actress who crushed Nicholson's dream. In 1990, Jack Nicholson stood behind the camera for the first time in almost 2 decades. He was 53, at the height of his fame, and ready to prove that he was more than an actor. The project was The Two Jakes, the long-awaited sequel to Chinatown, a film that had defined a generation. It was supposed to be his great return, his moment to step into the shoes of director and create something timeless. But that dream did not survive the storm that followed. And the storm had a name: Faye Dunaway. 15 years earlier, they had created cinematic gold together. Their chemistry in Chinatown was effortless, almost mystical. Jack once said that no one could look at a camera the way Faye did. She was unpredictable, fragile, and electric. But when she returned for The Two Jakes, that magic turned into chaos. The woman who once inspired him now tested every ounce of his patience. From the first day of filming, the set felt tense. Faye arrived late more often than not. She argued over lines, questioned camera angles, demanded rewrites. Crew members whispered that she was trying to direct the film herself. Jack, already balancing the weight of directing, writing, and acting, felt his dreams slipping out of control. Every conversation with her became a battle. Every day on set felt like a tug of war between art and ego. Faye had her reasons. She was one of the last true stars of the golden age, used to perfection and power. But Nicholson worked differently. He thrived on instinct and collaboration. For him, film was a living thing, sawing, messy and alive. For her, it was marble that needed to be carved until it gleamed. The two philosophies collided like tectonic plates. The earth shook, and the project began to crumble. Witnesses said there were days when Jack's voice echoed across the studio, breaking through the noise of lights and cameras. He was known for control, but on that set he lost it. The pressure of performing and directing at once crushed him. Friends who visited said he looked older every week, his usual spark replaced by fatigue. Some nights he stayed alone in the editing room until dawn, trying to fix what he felt was slipping beyond repair. When production finally ended, the film was a wreck. The chemistry that once defined them was gone. The Two Jakes released to disappointing reviews and weak box office returns. The critics did not just judge the film, they judged him. They called it confused, indulgent, directionless. For Nicholson, it was more than a professional failure. It was a personal wound. He had poured everything into the movie, and what came back was emptiness. The pain was sharpest because it came from someone he once trusted. Faye Dunaway had been a muse, a partner, a friend. Now she represented everything that could go wrong when art turned into combat. Their arguments became legend in Hollywood. Rumors said she threw scripts, he slammed doors, and the crew stood frozen between them. The truth was simpler and sadder. Two artists who once shared a heartbeat no longer spoke the same language. Jack never directed another film. He returned to acting, to the safety of chaos in front of the camera. But the fire to lead from behind it was gone. Those close to him said, The Two Jakes drained his faith in collaboration. It showed him that even the most powerful chemistry can sour when pride gets louder than purpose. Years later, when asked about the experience, Nicholson smiled the way people do when they remember a dream that turned into a nightmare. He said that directing taught him everything he needed to know about human nature, that talent without humility becomes poison, and passion without trust becomes a war with no winner. The Two Jakes is rarely mentioned today, a forgotten sequel buried under the shadow of its predecessor. But for Jack, it never disappeared. It lived quietly in the back of his mind, a scar that never quite healed. He once said that success teaches you nothing, but failure tells you who you are. That film told him the truth. For Nicholson, Faye Dunaway was not just a co-star. She was the mirror that showed him the cost of chasing perfection. The dream of greatness broke under the weight of two wills that refused to bend. And when the dust finally settled, he understood that the line between art and destruction is thinner than anyone dares to admit. Number 5. Sean Penn, the director who suffocated Nicholson. By the year 2001, Jack Nicholson had lived half a century in front of the camera. He had played kings, killers, lunatics, and saints. At 64, he had nothing left to prove. Yet when a young and fiery director named Sean Penn asked him to star in The Pledge, Jack said yes. He saw in Penn a reflection of his younger self, reckless, brilliant, obsessed with truth. He thought they would understand each other. He was wrong. The Pledge was a dark and heavy story, a detective haunted by guilt and faith. Nicholson loved the script. He saw it as his chance to go deeper than he ever had before, to find something raw and human inside the silence of an old man. But once filming began, that silence was filled with tension. Sean Penn was not like the directors Jack was used to. He did not ask for collaboration. He demanded obedience. Every gesture, every pause, every breath had to match his vision. At first, Jack tried to adapt. He followed Penn's instructions, trusting that precision might lead to something new. But soon he felt trapped. Each time he tried to improvise, Penn stopped him. Each time he found a rhythm, Penn broke it apart. The freedom that had always fueled Jack's art was gone. He began to feel like a passenger in his own performance. Crew members whispered that the tension between them was unbearable. Some days, they said, you could feel the air freeze between takes. Jack once described the experience as running a marathon with his feet tied together. He was moving, but every step hurt. What he loved most about acting was discovery, the electricity of not knowing what might happen next. Under Penn's control, there was no discovery, only execution. Every emotion was dissected, every impulse examined. Penn would shoot the same scene 20, sometimes 30 times, searching for a detail only he could see. By the end of each day, Jack looked exhausted, as if the life had been drained out of him. The film was shot in the cold mountains of British Columbia. The weather was harsh, the schedule tighter than any he had faced in years. Between takes, Jack sat alone by the trailers, staring into the distance, his breath turning to mist in the winter air. The crew said he barely spoke. He was working, but not creating. For a man who built his legacy on instinct, it felt like imprisonment. When The Pledge was finally released, critics called it one of Nicholson's most controlled and haunting performances. They praised the subtlety, the restraint, the quiet pain behind his eyes. But what the audience saw as restraint was something else entirely. It was exhaustion. It was a man stripped of his freedom, performing inside invisible walls. Nicholson never blamed Penn publicly. He spoke kindly of him in interviews, calling him talented and passionate. But privately, those who knew him said he felt betrayed. He admired Penn's courage but hated his control. To Jack, directing was supposed to be a conversation, not a dictatorship. After The Pledge, Nicholson turned down several roles offered by Penn. The wound was too fresh. He told friends that he would rather fail on his own terms than succeed under someone else's command. It was not pride, it was survival. Over time, the film gained a cult following. People called it underrated, a hidden gem of modern cinema. But Jack never revisited it. He kept the memory locked away, a reminder of the fine line between vision and suffocation. For Nicholson, that project became a turning point. It taught him that even brilliance can become poison when it leaves no room to breathe. He realized that control, no matter how noble, can kill the very soul it tries to shape. The Pledge may have earned praise, but it cost him something far greater than applause. Years later, when asked about working with Penn, Jack smiled and said that Penn made beautiful films but was too precise for his taste. Then he paused and looked away. His silence said more than words ever could. That film remains one of his finest performances, yet also one of his most painful. Because behind the quiet eyes of Jerry Black, the detective he played, there was another man, Jack Nicholson, trying to breathe under someone else's vision. And that, more than any role he ever took, was the hardest part of all. Number 6, Leonardo DiCaprio. The star Nicholson said was too safe. In 2006, Jack Nicholson walked onto the set of The Departed with the weight of 5 decades behind him. He was 69 years old, still fierce, still unpredictable, still the man every actor wanted to face across a camera. This time, the man standing opposite him was not an idol or a rival. It was Leonardo DiCaprio, the new symbol of Hollywood perfection, the Prince of Precision. Under the direction of Martin Scorsese, the two were about to create one of the most celebrated crime dramas of the 21st century. What the audience saw was magic. What happened behind the scenes was something else entirely. Nicholson arrived ready for war. He believed in danger. He believed that real acting was like standing on the edge of a cliff, one wrong step from disaster. DiCaprio was different. He approached every scene like an engineer, every emotion mapped, every gesture rehearsed until it fit exactly where it should. Jack respected the discipline, but he missed the chaos. He once told a friend that working with Leo felt like boxing with silk gloves. It was smooth, graceful, and careful, but there was no blood in it. Scorsese's set was meticulous. Every camera movement planned, every shadow measured. Jack, ever the rebel, wanted to break that rhythm. In one rehearsal, he told Scorsese he wanted to add something unexpected. The next day, during a tense confrontation, he reached into his coat and pulled out a real revolver. No one saw it coming. The fear on DiCaprio's face in that moment was not acting. It was instinct, raw and genuine. Scorsese kept the cameras rolling. The shot made it into the final cut, one of the film's most unforgettable moments. Afterward, DiCaprio was furious. He confronted Jack, asking why he would risk something so dangerous. Nicholson simply smiled and said that fear makes truth visible. For him, that was the essence of performance. For Leo, it was recklessness. Two philosophies colliding like flint and steel. One searching for safety, the other craving risk. The tension between them never exploded, but it never disappeared. Jack admired DiCaprio's dedication, his control, his intelligence, but he felt a distance he could never bridge. Leo's acting was built like a cathedral, perfect in structure, strong in design. Jack's was more like a wildfire, messy, alive, uncontrollable. When they stood together, the result was breathtaking on screen, but uneasy in spirit. During long nights of filming in Boston, Jack often stayed on set after everyone else had left. He would sit under the lights, smoking, thinking about how much Hollywood had changed. The new generation did not play with danger anymore. They prepared, they protected, they planned. He could not blame them. The business had become too big, too expensive, too polished for risk. But part of him missed the days when a scene could explode without warning, when emotion ruled over calculation. The Departed became a masterpiece. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture, finally giving Scorsese the Oscar that had eluded him for decades. Critics called Nicholson's performance as Frank Costello one of the wildest and most menacing of his career. But Jack walked away from the film with mixed feelings. He loved the result, but he hated the process. He said that everything was too safe, too clean, too measured. Even chaos had been choreographed. DiCaprio, ever professional, praised Jack publicly, calling him a legend and a teacher. Nicholson appreciated the respect but stayed distant. He admired the kid's talent but felt no fire between them. In private, he told friends that DiCaprio was great, but too safe for his blood. Years later, when asked about the experience, Nicholson spoke softly. He said that working with Leo showed him how different the world had become, that the hunger for danger had been replaced by the hunger for control. He did not condemn it. He just knew it was not his world anymore. For Nicholson, The Departed was both a victory and a farewell. It reminded him that the industry he once ruled had moved on to a new rhythm, one he could no longer hear. He respected the next generation, but he would never belong to it. The film proved that even in triumph, something inside him had changed forever. Because in the end, the greatest danger in acting is not taking risks. It is becoming too careful to feel alive. And for Jack Nicholson, danger was not just a method, it was the only truth that ever mattered. 6 names, 6 battles, and one man who never forgot. Jack Nicholson's story is not just about grudges or broken friendships. It is about the cost of truth in a world built on illusion. Every betrayal carves something deeper into him, a reminder that fame can be lonely, that genius can decay, and that even legends bleed when trust is broken. Through Marlon Brando, he learned that heroes can disappoint. Through Shelley Duvall, he saw that art without compassion becomes cruelty. Through Tom Cruise, he realized that perfection can be empty. Through Faye Dunaway, he discovered how ego can destroy creation. Through Sean Penn, he understood that control kills freedom. And through Leonardo DiCaprio, he accepted that safety is the slow death of passion. Each of these encounters shaped him, stripped him, and in a strange way, purified him. They taught him that greatness is not about applause, but about honesty. To be real in an industry of masks is the hardest role anyone can play. Nicholson never asked to be loved. He asked to be remembered for telling the truth, even when the truth was ugly. And maybe that is the lesson for all of us. The people we admire most can hurt us the deepest, but the pain they leave behind often becomes the wisdom that carries us forward. If you are still here, then you are part of this journey. Leave the number 1 in the comments so we know you stayed with us until the end. And if you found meaning in this story, make sure to subscribe, because the next chapter may change the way you see your heroes forever. 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 Forever.